Censorship. Warning. Censorship.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Rebel News live stream. I'm here, myself, Andrew, with Matt Brevner. I guess it's not afternoon for you, Matt, is it?
No, it is very much the morning.
Sorry to pull you out at 9 a.m. BC time where he is. Welcome to the Rebel News live stream. As I said, we're streaming live on YouTube, on Rumble, on SuperU, on Odyssey. You can send us your paid chats through Rumble, through a Rumble rant. You can send us using crypto or dollar amounts, fiat as they call them, Matt Brevner, on Odyssey. If you want us to take your questions, concerns, comments, news article, links, hate mail, whatever you want to direct at me today. We're going to go through some of our latest stories. We've got a couple of things from, the grand scheme of the news sector. Matt, what's new with you? What kind of stuff are you working on out there with Drea Humphrey? If people don't know Matt Brevner, I encourage you to go watch some of his content under his journalism page on rebelnews.com. What's going on with you and Drea Humphrey as of late?
Well, BC went from the most relaxed COVID state in Canada to one of the harshest at the snap of a finger. So that's been keeping Dre and I very busy, not to mention it's obviously election campaign season. So yeah, it seems that people are really taken aback and kind of caught off guard by all the restrictions that are coming down. And it's to say it's Orwellian is a understatement and a cliche at this point, but it's true.
And last night, Rebel News had an event in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. If you're watching from the United States, that's in the middle of nowhere, essentially. It's a big city in the middle of the country, and we had a big event there. Dr. Patrick Moore was present, and if I'm not mistaken, producer Efron, I believe he's one of the founders of Greenpeace Canada, and Sheila Gunn-Reid was there, Ezra Levant was there, Alexa from Montreal was there, or Quebec City, I'm not sure. Exactly. It's all Quebec to me, us French people. It's all France. And so many rebels were there for such a great event. I saw some pictures, short clip I think I saw. It looked like a great event. It was in this big amphitheater. And the reason I mention this is because if you missed out on last night, we've got upcoming events, one of which I can't tell you about, which may or may not be in the western provinces, Matt Brevner. But one I can tell you about is coming up in the Greater Toronto area on September 21st. We'll be releasing tickets for them soon. We have a huge guest that we can't name. You're going to know who he is, or she. I'm not good at this. You're going to know who they, are. Big name from American media. In terms of echelons of fame, probably near the top or at the top. And you're not going to want to miss this. So it's in a location. I'm not sure if we're giving the location out yet, but it's in the Toronto area. Anywhere in the GTA from west to east, you'll be close enough to attend. And it's going to be on September 21st. That's right before the vaccine passport drops in Ontario. And that's right after the Canadian federal election, Matt Brevner. What are your thoughts on getting together for the last time? I know you guys are already in vaccine passport land, or has that happened yet in BC?
Yeah, that came into effect on the 13th, so we are officially in two-state territory.
Well, that's a fun time. So then you can't leave because you can't get on a train or a plane.
Well, maybe I can, because I think what they're saying is the end of October is the restriction for flying domestically. Right. However, if the Liberals win, although if they don't, it might still be that. I'm not sure where other parties stand on that policy specifically. But yeah, if I have a chance to get out of here for the very last time, I'll gladly take it. So, my address. Hit me with that flight.
Matt Brevner is going to be here. You guys can buy your tickets based on that alone. So you should be able to fly in if you even want to fly in, if you want to get a ticket for that. So that will be a lot of fun. Details to come. I know the tickets aren't going to be too expensive at all for people, and it's going to be a good time. I'll be there, so at the very least, you guys can have that. I'll do the show myself. A one-man stand-up comedy special? No, it's not going to happen. Don't worry, you guys. It's going to be better than that. So that's going to be before the passport drops, of course, on September 22nd in Ontario. You won't be able to go to gyms. You won't be able to go to movie theaters. You won't be able to go to anything non-essential. So if you guys have guesses on who the guest is going to be, send us a Rumble rant or a hyper chat on that. If you have any suggestions as to what we should do at the event, any other things you want to happen there, whether it's, autograph signings with Matt Brevner or, dunk David Menzies in a pool. We should do that, producer Efron. If we can get one of those big dunk tanks and throw it at a target and dunk David Menzies, I'd pay at least $20 for that. I don't know about you guys. So the way to keep up to date is go to rebelnews.com and click on the events page, and we will have all the events there for you. Once again, September 21st in the Toronto area. Look out for the event there. Our first news story, Matt Brevner, is one of your videos. You were at a We Are All Essential protest recently. You want to set that one up for us?
Sure. So last Wednesday there was a protest in front of BC's or Vancouver City Hall, which was on the heels of the report we covered with Drea, which was the essential frontline nurses and doctors walking out of VGH, which was part of the worldwide walkout rally. Mainstream news reported it initially as a few hundred people, then maybe 1,000, but by my estimate, there could have been 10,000, because as far as I could see going up Cambie Street and as far as I could see going down the Cambie Street Bridge, I just saw a sea of people. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It reminded me of the Olympics, to be honest. This report was not that. 2 Wednesdays in a row when people are working jobs, especially when a lot of these people who are working jobs and protesting are not sure if they're still going to have jobs. I understand you have to make hay while the sun is shining. The turnout was not as strong. However, there were some groups, some new faces that I hadn't seen before at these protests. So it was interesting to kind of gauge the audience, and a lot of vaccinated people there wearing masks that were just there because they're against the mandates. So I thought that was interesting and obviously counter narrative.
It definitely is. It might not be accurate science, but you can do what you want in my books as long as you're not taking away my rights, which is a stance I think it's important for people to have, especially when there are disagreements. I mean, I'm not wearing a mask outside for anybody, but if you want to do that, you go right ahead, and I support your right to protest or do whatever you want, and I think that's how this world used to be until it became fashionable and cool and edgy to tell people what to do. Producer Efron, can we please play that video?
Do you agree with that racism? Sure. I would imagine that you have empathy for the plight of the black Canadian. I'm not.
We're here for our freedoms. We're here for our rights. We're going to make a difference, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it diplomatically. Yeah, we're going to vote Trudeau out. PPC, Max and Bernier.
We're at the Small Business BC protest. Behind me is a crowd of a few hundred people. Very eclectic, I must add. People from all walks of life, all ages, vaccinated, unvaccinated.
Hopefully now people are kind of realizing what it really is about, and that it's a lot more than just a passport.
We're going right back to Nazi Germany with this. And if nobody sees this, because they've been denied a history.
They will not be allowed to go to restaurants, to other public places. And that in a sense, is a form of segregation. So yeah, I do not support that.
You do not support that. As someone who's vaccinated, you do not support that.
No, I do not.
I want to see every single person next Wednesday carrying Canadian Bill of Rights. This is the foundation we're going to reestablish within our country.
It seems that they are all rallied behind their disapproval of the vaccine passport.
Something's going on here. This is aggressive. They're going to wake up with the worst hangover they've ever had when they realize that the government, the media, and everybody has been lying to them, and that the drugs that we're talking about right now actually prevent you from getting it and stop the spread of COVID.
I think that the political powers that have become accustomed to doing politics one way are not prepared for what is transpiring across this nation. There is a change. The political landscape has been shaken.
I think it's time that whether you're vax, not vax, mask, not mask, it's time to stand.
Yeah.
It's time to question. And I don't think that people that said, you know what, I'm going to get the shot so things can go back to normal, I don't think that they said, yeah, and now I want to prove it everywhere I go. Or that I want to keep up my status, or continue to go back and get boosters, or have my small children vaxxed.
We are the only political body that is against lockdowns, curfew, stay-at-home policy.
Well, Matt Brevner, while he's on his phone.
I'm checking work chat.
It's fine. It's fine. The question I want to ask you is: we see Vlad there, who's a known activist group leader. Is there a stated goal to this protest, as in an action we're going to take? We've been protesting, as in the people have been protesting for a year and a half now. And what I tend to have a problem with is, why haven't we made demands? Why haven't we gone to the legislature and knocked on the door and demand somebody speak to them? I keep saying us. I shouldn't include myself in it. That's just the way I'm speaking, as if I'm them. Why haven't they done all these things? Or am I wrong? Was there a stated cause and actionable thing that they were mentioning at this protest? It says, we're going to demand this. We're going to propose this bill. We want to eliminate this. Obviously, they want to eliminate the vaccine passport. But are we following it up with any action?
Well, here's the thing. These people from all different groups, for the most part, don't come from any sort of political or legal background. They're just concerned Canadians. So with that, they're obviously zealous. But my understanding is, from what I've seen over the past year, just going to protests and stuff, is it's a little bit fractured. I don't recall a specific call to action, and it's like you had maybe Freudian slip alluded to. There's only so much we can do. We cover the story despite our interests or what we think would be best for the outcome of our province or our country, whatever. We're there to document. So it's short answer, no, I don't see that. I think maybe obviously protests are important, especially like the ones we've had a couple of weeks ago, just because it pulls in. It takes a very special type of person to be an activist, but it's different when you're just going to come out and show your support for one day, or when you're driving by and you're honking. So I think it's important to give people who who are concerned about the movement or the vaccine passports or whatever the cause, really for any cause, give them something palatable that they can get behind, and that's easy enough for them to access without a lot of education, because you don't want to overwhelm them with information or anything else. You want to give people something very clear and something very specific that they can do, and that they can tell 3 friends, and then they can tell 3 friends.
I want to pose I want to pose this question to you as well as our audience, so maybe you guys can send us a chat about it. What do you say to the people who say, listen, Black Lives Matter and Antifa burned down a bunch of streets last year, they rioted, they blocked highways, they blocked roads, they intimidated people, they got results. What do you say to people who say, maybe they should be doing stuff like that, maybe people should be making more, not violence against people, but more damage to infrastructure? What do you say to somebody who would maybe suggest that to one of these groups?
Well, I'll say this. Just because, let's say BLM, for example, got a lot of money and a lot of mainstream attention and a lot of virtue signaling from celebrities, what did it actually accomplish? What changed?
The only thing I can think of is police defunding, which might have been what they wanted.
Well, potentially, but I think it's a little bit short-sighted. But I mean, as far as like the improvement of life for the average visible minority in North America, has that gone up a degree or not? Like, no, it hasn't. If anything, it created a bigger divide, which is what violence inevitably always does. So I think that's a terrible suggestion and awfully short-sighted. You need to stop paying attention to the mainstream news. I would suggest, if you actually think that these BLM riots or the property damage, which I think was over $600 million or something like that in commercial and residential property damage, like, it didn't actually really accomplish anything. That's just my opinion.
And what did result from places like New York City defunding the police by $1 billion and Los Angeles is an increase of crime, and specifically murder rates went up in many cities that suffered through those riots, because police just got into a zone there where they're backing off from a bunch of violence that happens, and they're not going to respond to these things because it's not safe for them. We saw that with the CHOP and CHAZ zones, where paramedics and police couldn't get to people on time because they didn't want the authorities coming in and helping them. And we saw the riots where, what's his name, producer Efron, who got charged for shooting the two guys. Kyle something, I want to say, with the rifle on his back. But anyways, it results in violence going both ways, and the solution of less policing did not turn out to be a good one. Now, the reason I asked the question of what goal or set out mandate people wanted to ask for or demand is because I, as much as anybody, do not like vaccine passports, obviously. But I think when we're just standing in the streets, that's all well and good. We can bring more people in, but I think there needs to be a more concerted effort onto what the actions are. So when people email me and ask me, what can I do about my kid, and they're taking him out of sports if he's not vaccinated, and what can I do about the mask being put on my children, I tell people, listen, unless you're willing to get together and make demands with other parents and stand up to the people who are actually making rules against you or forcing these things upon you, then I don't know what you expect to be saved from, by who or whatever, unless you're willing to just sue, which the average individual can't accomplish on their own because they might not have money or resources for that. Now, we're doing the best we can here with Fight the Fines. We've got legislation coming all across the country. Not legislation, excuse me, legal action coming all across the country to fight these things. But on an individual level, Matt Brevner, I'm just trying to get the point across that I think people need to be more, focused on what the actual end goal is and take action that they think is actually going to result in getting what they want, instead of going out there and saying, carry your Constitution around with you and buy my shirt with a heart on it. I know I'm a bit of a cynic, Matt Brevner. I'm sorry.
No, you know, it's true, but it doesn't even have to be as grandiose as some sort of action plan. It's like your money talks. Where are you spending your money? Do you have your kids in public school? What corporations are you supporting? What restaurants are you supporting? What businesses are you supporting? Are you actively supporting businesses that are repressing you? Well, then maybe you shouldn't. And if it's like that simple. Money really talks. If enough of these companies see that, hey, wait, there's a large enough demographic of people that this is negatively impacting, they will act on that, regardless of the moral implications, right? And the reason, that's so obvious with, for example, Pride Month. When you look at major corporations in North America, their branding is completely different than it is in the Middle East or it is in Europe pertaining to Pride Month. Now, is that because there's a duality on a moral stance for these corporations? No, it's because they're placating to the majority in who's buying their products in these areas. These corporations and companies don't care about you. You can't expect them to do the right thing. All they understand is balance sheets. So if you're concerned about these things, maybe stop buying Starbucks, stop going out to Cactus Club. It's simple. And that's really where it starts, I think. If you're not politically involved or politically minded, be more careful with how you spend your money.
Producer Efron, has that campaign started of We Won't Ask? Yeah, can we pull that up, please? So speaking of what you're talking about, Matt Brevner, we've got a campaign called We Won't Ask, which is businesses saying that they won't ask for vaccine proof, And we've uploaded a sticker there for people to buy or to download. We have a suggested donation, so it is free if you want to get that and put it in your window. I'll just read a little bit. Your restaurant, store, or gym. Of course, I want the gyms to do this so I can, decrease my body mass index, which is a sexist and patriarchal thing anyways, producer Efron. But no, on a serious note, we won't ask about your vaccination status. This is something you can put up in your storefront, and you can donate if you want to, but otherwise we just want to promote the idea that there are places out there that are supporting freedom and they don't necessarily want to know what your medical history is. Now, are we going to start asking for STD checks at clubs? Are we going to start asking if you have your measles shot when you go to the mall? I don't know. I think it's a stupid stance for a government or a business to take, that we care about something. And I'm getting really close to the YouTube limit here. It's let's just say something that I can't, it's so stranglehold to talk on YouTube. I can't even believe it. I'm trying to come up with the proper terms of how I can say something that is less dangerous than other certain things without getting us kicked off YouTube. If this is the stance you guys want to take in your businesses, if you're watching and you're not a huge fan of Rebel News and you wanted to see what we're talking about, or if you know people, if this is the stance you're going to take, then what stance won't you take against all that stuff? Are we going to ask people, are you allowed to be in that wheelchair? Are you allowed to have that seeing eye dog? Now, I know there's legislation out there, municipal laws that say you are allowed to ask for proof of an eye dog, but when was the last time you've seen that happen? When was the last time you thought it was a good idea to question somebody's disability or know their medical history before, just serve them their movie stub or something like that, something that you're not going to be allowed to do. So I think we're doing what we can to help. And I'll ask you another question, Matt. Somebody might say, hey, isn't putting your business on the website, setting yourself up as a target? Or do you think that it's a good thing for people to, get out there, that people are welcome in their restaurant? How do you feel about that?
I mean, this is maybe a cop-out, but I can't comment on that. I really can't. If you're a small business owner and your ability to feed yourself and your kids is standing in, the opening of your restaurant, the thing that really sucks is the government is making these establishments become the police. Mm-hmm. So they're having to enforce. So after being closed on and off for 18 months in different degrees based on where you are in the country, now you're forced to isolate or segregate and discriminate against potentially at least 30% of your customer base in that area, and you have to take the brunt of the vitriol for it. So I mean, that's a very difficult position to be in. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. If I'm just being, my rebel spirit wants to say, yeah, do it, stick it to the man, but then at the same time I'm like, it's easy for me to say sitting in this chair, so all you can.
Vancouver.
Yeah, from the inside. I love my little bird cage.
Producer Efron, can we please bring up Doug Ford's recent tweet about the protesters at the hospitals? I want to give some protesters some credit because I like and think this is the proper way to do stuff in this instance. Of course, there's Frontline Nurses as a group who's gathered nurses from across the regions here in Ontario to protest against their forced vaccinations at their places of employment. So of course they're going to protest at their places of employment. Could you imagine when the college teachers and staff have a contract disagreement with the college? You don't want them to protest down on the other side of the city. You would think they would do that on the campus. So that's what people are doing in front of the hospitals. They're not disrupting them. And I want to point out that those protesters are doing a good job. And Doug Ford tweeted out the other day, there we go, yes, the protests we're seeing outside of hospitals are selfish, cowardly, and reckless. And we'll break that down in a second. Our healthcare workers have sacrificed so much to keep us all safe during this pandemic. They don't deserve this kind of treatment, not now, not ever. Leave our healthcare workers alone. So the protests we're seeing outside of our hospitals are selfish, cowardly, and reckless. So he's saying, he's basically alluding, he's not mentioning that there are nurses from these hospitals protesting there. It's selfish, cowardly, and reckless for them to stand up for their own rights, that they are either God-given or inalienable rights, that they, for some reason, it's selfish and cowardly and reckless for them to protest their own employers who are taking away their rights. Furthermore, they've fired nurses in Ontario on many occasions. They've received increased funding of hospitals, increased funding for healthcare in general. They've built secondary hospitals, field hospitals outside of 2 hospitals, didn't get used. I think one of them saw 1 patient. So they're getting all this funding while they're firing nurses and then saying that the hospitals are overrun and they don't have enough nurses, but also you don't get the right to protest outside of your place of business, which is effectively firing you if you don't follow the rules. Even though we're supposed to trust the healthcare workers to 10,000%, Matt Brevner, but we also aren't supposed to trust them when they're saying, I'm not comfortable with doing this in order to keep my job. Help me figure it out.
We live in a time where we just got to zoom out. We got to zoom out for a second because really there's just such a full-on blitz attack on what's true, on the truth. And unfortunately, a lot of people just don't even question it. So, like, for example, it's probably selfish, cowardly, and reckless to fire healthcare professionals when we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? That's kind of weird. Why would you do that? Anyways, at the protest 3 weeks ago, also a part of the same protest are the BEC leg, or the Vancouver leg of it. That clip that was kind of circulating on the internet of those people standing in front of the ambulance. Now, let me give some context. I don't know if producer Efron, producer Efron has that video or that clip floating around, but what people don't understand, if you're not from Vancouver, it looks like it was people standing in front of an ambulance that are just kind of getting in the way, when in reality, the emergency entrance is a block and a half up 12th. So that's nowhere near emergency. That was an ambulance coming in and out of staff parking. So was there even someone in the ambulance? I don't know. Did we verify that? I don't know. But that was the first thing that was on the news, right? Oh, crazy protesters are blocking ambulances. Like, come on, people, use your head. Like, just use your critical thinking. I'm sorry, like, this just gets me so angry. Like, that I struggle with hypocrisy. I have a very hard time with hypocrisy, and it's just the blatant disrespect for the average person's intelligence is just, it baffles me. Like, and it's just on a daily basis, it just.
Is this what we're talking about here?
No, that looks like St. Paul's Hospital. I don't think this was a part of the same protest. Daily Hive. Yeah, no, this wasn't the same protest. Daily Hive.
Well, assuming what Doug Ford's talking about, the Toronto protest, they're not at the entrance even to the building. Police are stopping that. They're not where the emergency intake is. Of course, it's always in a back place on any hospital. So the implication is that they're somehow impeding or disrupting the hospital's operations or harassing workers. And the other implication is that it's just random people and not the actual nurses. Right. The leader of the group is a former nurse for a long-term care home in the Toronto protest that just happened. So it's not like it's just random people. And then Antifa shows up, self-described Antifa. It was like 3 or 4 people hassling David Menzies. And they want to just, they think that they see an injustice and they're stopping fascism, when it's actually them who just live and breathe mainstream media and use their own fascistic tactics against another person. And I want to segue that to an upcoming video from Adam Soos out in Alberta, our ever-growing Alberta team, which is Adam Soos, Sheila Gunn-Reid. Let me know if I'm missing anyone, producer Efron, Mocha Bazurgan, Sydney, Psycho Sid, who I'm forgetting his last name right now. It's Fizzard. The greatest rock name in 80s history, Sidney Fizzard. So they're all right out there, Keen Simone as well. So we got a nice big team out there. And at least a few of them were at this protest with Antifa showing up in, I don't know, a dozen or less people blasting weird dubstep music, I think it was, holding a sign in the middle of the road, pushing and shoving with people. It made both sides of the protest look bad. Antifa was more the aggressors. They were pushing and physically trying to assault people, whereas the other side was just sort of doing their own tactic against them of standing in the way. If I'm going to say who's the instigator there, I'm going to say it's 70-30 Antifa. But the Calgary police, producer Efron, as we discussed, just standing by doing nothing, saying that if you actually want to press charges, then we're going to have to charge everybody. Just doing their best not to get involved, which I think is the wrong way to do things. Eventually, they did have to handcuff a couple people. And so this is a really exciting video that's coming out, I think, later this afternoon. And we have a teaser for you that we can go ahead and play right now, please.
Some among those heroes who have decided they do not wish to be vaccinated or are speaking out against mandatory vaccines are being treated as pariahs. We saw yesterday that Calgarians are not standing for this narrative. They are backing their frontline workers, and those efforts are continuing at protests today.
Welcome here. Get the out of here with your
So those are big cops there. They handle the Antifa guys pretty well. I kind of feel like, Matt, that those guys are LARPing as LARPers. I mean, they're not, I doubt they're anything other than an Antifa sect in name only. They can never get big numbers to show up. They just have a bunch of scrawny dudes who are somewhere between 17 and 22 years old show up, and you can see the one pushing the bullhorn against the woman with his backpack. So that's what I was saying, is that they were, you know, using their tactics against him a little bit. But it was all a crapshoot there. I don't know. Have you had experience with an Antifa-like group out there in BC yet?
I had experience at that protest last week, actually, with a Antifa type
the first
individual. Yeah, he, you know, he was standing on the side of the street, very upset, screaming profanities, flying around his fingers in offensive ways. And he was wearing a shirt that said F, but the full word racism on it. And I just thought it was, you know, I was like, well, you know, he seems to care about the plight of the average, you know, person of color in Canada. So I'm sure he's not aware that, you know, black Canadians are disproportionately less vaccinated than Caucasian Canadians. So, you know, in a spirit of empathy, I figured if I enlightened him about this fact, he maybe would have a change of heart. But rather he shoved me and elbowed me in the head.
Yes, it's a statistic that is lost on a lot of these groups and a lot of the mainstream media. I know this because I looked it up for the United States recently, as recently as Sunday, that only 42% of black Americans are vaccinated and 48% of Hispanic Americans are vaccinated. I think I'm less sure on what the white statistic was. I think 60, and then Asians are the highest, around 70. So I'm wondering where these activist groups are on these talks of segregating people based on vaccination status, because it is going to disproportionately affect black, and if you want to say, I wouldn't call Spanish people brown, but if you want to generalize black and brown people, if you're a person who does that, then you're going to be discriminating against at least half of them. In New York specifically, the numbers are even higher. So and where they have a vaccine passport. So if let's say the numbers are even just 40% of black people in Canada, all of a sudden you're keeping 40% of black people out of clubs, out of indoor restaurant dining, out of movie theaters, out of sports. You're keeping minorities out of all these things at least a 40% rate, and you see nothing wrong with that. However, if it was something else, some other plight, where, I don't know, pick your poison. If it was anything else other than this that's supposed to be for your safety, everybody would be up in arms and throwing these statistics in our faces. Is that a fair point to make, do you think?
Well, that's an extremely fair point. Not only that, I mean, I don't have the statistics in front of me. I don't have producer Efron live on set from the Vancouver location, but I would imagine, you know, I have Black American family, I have Hispanic American family. Not all of them have endured police interaction in their life. Not everyone has gone through a negative police altercation. However, every one of them are now being affected by these vaccines. I haven't done a poll on my family to see who's vaccinated and who isn't. But it seems to me that this seems to be a further reaching issue than potentially police brutality. So where are the protesters? Where are the BLM riots for that? Again, hypocrisy on full display for everybody to see. It kills me, man. Yeah. It kills me. I really have a hard time with it, because, you know, it's the perversion of the truth. It's perversion of the average person, because I feel like the average person really wants to do good. They want to do what's right, but unfortunately, you know, our minds mislead us, and we're maybe miseducated, and we fall into echo chambers and whatever else. And it's you know, 10 years ago when the stakes weren't as high, it's not as consequential for the average person, but now it's like with where we're at in North America and the world, really, like, we don't have, like, you can't be doing that, man. We got time for that, you know.
Producer Efron, do we have any hyper chats or rumble rants to get to, or have you compiled those yet? Okay. Do you want to bring up the latest Twitter poll? Well, the election poll. It's Canadian polling. We can take a look at that when we have a moment. I also want to talk about one of our new reporters, Lewis Brackpool, out in England. He seems like a fun-loving guy. To me, he looks like a cross between Paul Joseph Watson and Dan Hardy, former UFC fighter. I don't know if you guys are going to get that reference, but he looks like a mashup between them. He's done his second video, I believe, has dropped this morning, so UK time, 5 hours ahead or whatever it is. So I want to give him some coverage. He's a good lad. It's been a while since we've had coverage in England for stuff. We were trying Fight the Fines there as well. It had some good steam. Lincoln Jay went there to do a few stories, but now we finally have somebody cemented on the ground. He speaks English, as in he speaks British. He can speak to the people, and he's doing a good job, I think. So I think we owe it to ourselves and him to show his video. Can we please play that, producer Efron? And then bring up the polling. I want to see the latest polls for the PPC and NDP and all the C's and the P's in Canada. You need more time? Okay, let's go ahead and play Lewis's video.
The news has been depressing, extremely depressing. So in this video, my goal is to show you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm going to go around some Western countries and we're going to take a look at a few things on how we can beat this and what we can use to beat this. So let's start with Canada. Canada has an election coming up, and that is on the 20th of September. So write that in your diaries. I may be from the UK, and I can't obviously participate in these elections, but from an outsider's point of view, the only party that is against
censorship
mandates, the People's Party of Canada. The terms left and right don't mean anything anymore. Not when it comes to the COVID response. So any lefties that have stumbled across this haven't got your trust in Trudeau anymore because, yeah, he is a man-child. The PPC are the only party that opposes vaccine passports and mandates. That tall bloke, he's essentially a liberal. He's like what Boris is over here. He is a tool. So that's the first step for Canada. Moving on to the US. So Biden recently announced that he wants to mandate vaccinations in the workforce for over 100 employees. And now well over 27 states have refused this mandate. This is incredible news. These states include Idaho, Florida, Arizona, Texas, South Dakota, Arkansas, Georgia, Oklahoma, Alabama, Wyoming, Tennessee, Nebraska, Iowa, South Carolina, Missouri, Mississippi, and Alaska, and many more are coming out the woodwork to go against Biden's tyranny. This is great news. I believe only 2 or 3 are Democrat states, so shows who's fighting for freedom, eh? Now going to the UK, in England primarily, the Telegraph, which is, well, we call it the Tory graph because it's a little bit centre-right over here in the UK. They've posted a bombshell article recently saying that teenage boys are more at risk from vaccines than COVID and that are 6 times more likely to suffer from heart problems from getting this vaccine. And this dismantles the jab plan for 12 to 15-year-olds. All the more, whilst the JCVI, Britain's vaccine advisors, have said they do not recommend vaccinating 12 to 15-year-olds, yet the government is pushing towards this direction anyway. There is a group called Together, where you can sanction your local MP. In the About section on togetherdeclaration.org, it shows their main areas of concern, which include the vaccine passports, vaccinating children, the Coronavirus Act of 2020, medical freedom, mass testing, lockdowns, and the open debate. Furthermore, you can of course write to your local MP or join the next demonstration. I'll be covering a lot of the demonstrations coming up, so Hopefully I'll see you there. Recently, Boris Johnson and the Health Secretary has stated that they are scrapping the idea of a vaccine passport for now. They've also stated that the government should keep it in reserve as a potential option.
But you're not doing it. Well, what I can say is that we've looked at it properly, and whilst we should keep it in reserve as a potential option, I'm pleased to say that we will not be going ahead with plans for vaccine passports.
You will not be going ahead.
We will not.
Unfortunately, you're watching this video on...
So we're keeping in reserve. I don't know what that means. We're going to try it again later, I think, Matt. Louis Brackpool coming to us white on white from The Matrix, I think. He's trying out for a role in the new Matrix Revolutions. You see the trailer for that? I'm concerned the former men, now female directors of the original Matrix series have made the new Matrix. I'm thinking that Neo and Trinity are going to become one gender fluid being at the end. That's my guess is what's going to happen there. Also nice Mike, Louis Brackpool. We got some hyper chats and rumble rants to get to, and then if we can get that poll up, producer Efron, let's do some analysis after that. Sisser2 says, who is funding the Antifa thugs, Tide/Soros? Now, see, that's what I'm talking about, Matt, is I might believe that if it's in the U.S., but when 7 scrawny dudes and 1 girl, and I think 1 guy in a wheelchair show up, and, you know, all they can do is talk trash and play crappy music, I'm tending to think that they're just like, yeah, let's go out and do our part. That's what I think about that. Fraser McBurney says, we've been fighting these globalists from the start, starting with the yellow vests, hugs over masks, COVID lockdowns, and COVID passports. The fight goes on for freedom. I'm a little confused as to what we're saying we're fighting there, but I digress. Joyful from the Heart says, JCCF is suing the Canadian government looking for people impacted by the mandatory vax, especially kids in universities, school business owners. A friend of mine submitted her case to them this week. Well, thanks for the plug for the JCCF, but you can always go to rebelnews.com instead and go to novaccinepassports.com because we're better. We've won a lot more lawsuits. Their people are getting fired. I don't know how much I'm supposed to say, but I prefer rebelnews.com and our legal team led by Victoria. We've got Ultimate Chad, what's his last name?
Wilkinson.
Chad Williamson, the Ultimate Chad, love his sideburns in Alberta, who is the one who won our case for the elections, the debate commission. So our team is just killing it from west to east coast. I'm pretty sure one of the former lawyers is running for office now. We've got so many things on the go. It's crazy. My office is probably going to be taken in favor of lawyers, so who knows what's happening anymore on that, Matt Brevner. Do we have the latest polls from Canadian polling? Let's bring those up. Always exciting to see the numbers. Enemy of the People poll, producer Efron says. That's not the one I want. That doesn't even, I don't believe this one at all.
The People? Who paid for that?
I'm going to send you the other one. Matt Brevner, how people ask me all the time, how often, how much do you trust the polling in Canada? How much do you trust whether or not there'll be nefarious voting systems in Canada? Can I get your opinion on that?
Oh, what can I say on YouTube?
You just can't say that the American election was rigged.
It wasn't.
Joe Biden is the supreme ruler of all of the universe.
I don't trust any Canadian politician to do the right thing.
No.
I don't really know how else to expound on that. I think, I don't trust any of them at all. I don't trust where their money goes. I don't trust the news that's reporting to us. I don't trust their polls. I don't trust their promises. I don't even trust that that's their real hair. Like, I don't trust anything about these guys. See the
Trudeau's eyebrows?
The danger. Here's the danger. When these politicians are framing the debates or conversations around what's going on in our country in a certain way, or that we're receiving information in a certain way, they're setting the precedent that what we are presenting you is true. Therefore, we need to debate or have a conversation about these issues framed upon what I've presented to be true and you've already conceded is the groundwork for what's happening in our country. So I don't agree to any of that. I don't think that the issues that they're talking about in our country are what Canadians actually care about, or are there even things that they're actually going to work on. I want nothing to do with any of it. I think it's all crap. I think it's all lies and misinformation, and I won't even, I'm not even getting, they want to fight, I'm not even getting in the ring. So that's my stance on it.
I mean, I recall somebody saying to Jagmeet Singh at the debates, Mr. Singh, you're encouraging people to go vote for the polls before you've even released a costed plan for yourself as Prime Minister. Do you think that's even fair to ask of people? And he just said yes, and then he did say yes, and then continued on with his answer. He sees no problem with having a plan where Canadians can actually see how much they're going to spend of their money. It's guaranteed more. What they talk about is, retrofitting all buildings, eliminating gas. So obviously you're gonna have to buy an electric car. You're gonna have to use other means. There's gonna be taxes going towards electric trains and whatnot. They're gonna raise taxes on anyone, probably over $100,000. Their cost is going to go up. Having said that, Aaron O'Toole's spending a whole ton of money too. He's supposed to be the conservative. He says, give me 10 years, Matt. Vote for me 3 times before I'm going to, start making you guys some money. But I'm also going to give more money for mental health on reserves, more health care money. We're going to make no taxes in December. We're going to give you rebates for dining indoors, of course, with your vaccine passport. So they all have spending. He's also going to do the carbon levy, which is not a carbon tax, we swear, you guys. It's just taking your money and then telling you what you can do with it. So I don't see a huge difference in any of the parties, besides, of course, the PPC. I'm sure the Green Party is even further left than the NDP, which is usually the case. But I don't see a huge difference in anybody saying, hey, instead of just promising you all these wonderful, shiny bells and whistles, we're going to do this that's going to make the country more money, or we're going to do this that's going to make your wages go up or your taxes go down. Nobody's saying that. We're stuck in this place now where we're $1 trillion in debt, and nobody seems to care with spending. With coronavirus, they all wrote blank checks to whomever their friends were, whether it was, Walmart, Amazon, hospital unions, teachers unions. Oh, it's all for your protection, and we're just giving you money to be safe and prepare for everything. And let's not forget the $61 million that was doled out to literally every media company in the country, including, Canadian Pizza and Manure Manager, and those are not jokes. Go watch my clip on that. Just random trade magazines and local newspapers. My point is, when does the spending stop? And to your point, I don't trust any of their plans, especially the ones that aren't even costed on the website. So let's look at this poll, producer Efron. Go ahead, Matt.
It's just insulting to our intelligence. You look at the debates, and the elephant under the rug that Canada is sitting on right now is our economy. It's our economy, and how I believe producer Efron, you can pull up this stat, but I think we're borrowing $500 million a day currently. This government is. And it's our deficit is now in the trillions. In 2019, or sorry, was it 2019 or 2015? Trudeau said that he would get us out of debt and balance the budget within 4 years.
Yeah, that was his first promise. That's
right.
when he was famously quoted as saying the balance will budget itself. You guys,
Right. So
the budget will balance itself.
We didn't in the debates. We didn't even talk about the frickin' economy, man. We took 20 minutes in this whole debate to talk about affordability. Okay, we didn't even call it the economy. We called it affordability, which means what are we gonna do for you so that you can, keep more of your money and whatever. And this is all great. These are all things that placate to, low-hanging fruit. Like, obviously, I mean, it's just ways to get votes, but our country is on the brink of economic collapse, and every single party leader is talking about, don't worry, we'll spend more for you. Don't worry, we'll spend. Like, do people not understand what's happening right now? It's actually insulting to our intelligence that none of these leaders will even just, look a camera straight in the eye and be like, Canada, we're in trouble, but don't worry, I'm not going to leave you. This is how we're going to get out of it. It's none of that. It's like, hey, we're just going to spend more money for this commission and spend more money for this initiative. And it's like, come on, man. We're better than that. At least I'd like to think we're better than that, and the average Canadian knows but it's terrifying. At least for me, the looking at the economic shambles of a country, and that's what really concerns me about this this election is, like, did Trudeau, Did he call this election because he thought he could actually get a majority? And if so, what's coming down the pipe in the next 2 to 4 years that they needed a majority to survive? Because the NDP has been basically signing off on any legislature they've proposed. Not to mention, we've been in a pandemic, and under emergency measures, they've basically had carte blanche to pass whatever they want to pass. So what hurricane is coming down the path for Canadians that Trudeau needs a majority government so that he can even live through it? That's what we should really be asking. Because if at the end of the day, if after this is all said and done, we're left with, again, a Trudeau minority government and a couple seat shuffling, what was it really for? More empty promises, more spending. Not to mention during a pandemic when he's campaigning on your kids are going to die unless they get vaccinated, and we need to shut up these anti-vaxxer types. But wait, you're going to have 20, I'm not sure how many registered voters are in Canada, but let's say you're going to have half the country, you're going to have tens of millions of people meet in person to vote and then put themselves at risk. What are we talking about right now? It's just ridiculous. Like, what are we really talking about right now? Like, how do people not see the hypocrisy, the lies, the fear-mongering, the division? It disgusts me. Sorry, man, it's early. I'm riled up right now.
You're going to have a long day ahead of you then. A lot of the times when people, let's say Bernie Sanders, for example, will say, oh, you must get free schooling and free healthcare in the United States. And I'm like, I've looked at Bernie's free schooling plan, or eliminating the debt plan. It's a terrible plan. They lose like $80 billion over 10 years, regardless of what it is. When I hear these bad ideas, even in Canada, more free healthcare, free school, this, that, and the other, and I'm just like, okay, those are bad ideas. But at what point am I forced to consider the fact that the government doesn't spend money on what I want it to anyways? It continuously increases costs and takes money away from me. At what point do I have to start considering, oh, we can afford all this free stuff? If we're going to spend to the moon $1 trillion, or if the United States is going to spend $3.4 trillion, or whatever their national budget is, and give so little of it back to the people in the form of tax breaks or infrastructure, or securing the border. These are just American examples. In Canada, you can say secure the border. We can say infrastructure, which we're in dire need of. More trains, more ways to get around, cheaper gas, and we can refine it here. We can spend money on that. If we're not doing any of those things, then how can anyone argue that we can't just give the free things away if we're blowing our money on all this excess of stuff that we don't need anyways? If we're giving money to China for the Paris Climate Accord so that they can meet their 2040 goals and their 2030 goals without us, and we're still paying into that, why not pay for Jimmy, Bobby, Sally, Jermaine, Tyrone's, and every other name I can think of for a child? Why can't we just pay for their schooling? Why can't we just give away all this free money and a basic income? So therein lies the problem, is the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, the NDP, and the Greens are all saying the same thing, and they're just saying it with slightly different tones of voices and slightly different victims of whomever they're painting as having it the worst in Canada. They're all saying the same thing, and it's spend more money, but you don't get any of it. So it's I'm taking your money, we're putting it towards things that you'll never see, because I haven't shown you that I'm going to put it towards these things in the past. I mean, when Justin Trudeau in 2015 won, he promised one of the big things that people were listening to were more infrastructure. Like I said, rebuilding government buildings so that they don't look like they're made in 1970s communist Russia. Building more trains, expanding highways, things that haven't been done since 1985. You look at old footage from Canada in the 80s, it looks great, it looks prosperous. And now you look at things and there's construction that's been going on in downtown Toronto for a decade. So all these things aren't going to happen, Matt Brevner. So I struggle with the fact now that why am I against the free things when you're taking my money anyway?
Well, I'm not necessarily opposed to some free things, but I think with free things has to come a shuffling of and reform of institutions. Like, for example, university. I don't think there's any reason why we can't provide some sort of post-secondary, at least heavily subsidized, for the average child to be able to go to school and better themselves, because we want to give people incentives to work. You don't want to just have people stuck at home making $2,000 a month and not do anything. It's terrible for mental health, it's terrible for physical health, you name it, the list goes on, right? There's no reason why we should have 20 somethings buried with, $50, $60, $70,000 in student loans after coming out of a trade school where there's no guaranteed job placement, like, music schools or makeup schools or anything in the fine arts. Like, it's a scam. This stuff is all a scam. And I think it does require some reform. And this is obviously just like one issue, but yeah, they don't spend money on what they're saying they're going to spend money on anyway. So at least with something like that, maybe there would be something that actually affects the average person's life other than just their tax rate going up. It's disgusting to me how these politicians can virtue signal and talk about reconciliation. You talked about small towns across the country and how there's hundreds of nearly forgotten small towns across Canada that have been devastated by the pandemic, and not to mention that as there's small reserves within these small towns. And as we move towards automation, and as these towns become further and further left behind technologically, but we talk about reconciliation, what are we doing to rebuild infrastructure of these towns and these communities so they can generate revenue and have small self-sustaining economies? Because if we're not doing that, and if we're not talking about that with reconciliation, then all we're really doing is keeping people on government welfare. All we're really doing is stripping people of their dignity with an endless blank check, which ultimately causes further division between the average working person and the average person who is not fortunate enough to have a career. Anyways, we're left to carry the brunt of the division ultimately. So how we can have a conversation about reparations, and it seems to be all over, it's one of the main talking points of this election campaign, without actual conversations about working with Indigenous leaders to build up local economies within these reserves and retrofit them to be able to produce skilled workers, happy dynamics, happy households. Like, what are we really talking about? We're not talking about anything. It's all just virtue signaling and noise. So again, I don't buy any of it.
The reconciliation topic came up so much in the Canadian federal debates. They spent 20 minutes on it. Then they had a woman from the Aboriginal channel come on, because she was wearing feathered earrings, which, like, come on, lady. But we talked so much about it, and none of the plans talked about what we're actually going to do with the money. Now, personally, my plan would probably be different from a lot of them. And I think that woman who I just made fun of asked good questions. She asked about ending the Indian Act. She asked about what they're actually going to do to end the water advisories, which Justin Trudeau lied about. There's way more water boil advisories than he claimed there were. It was a blatant lie. He's way off. There's still like over 20, if I'm not mistaken, which is insane. So if you're going to give all these reserves and all these chiefs millions of dollars per year, and as everybody knows, the money doesn't get spent to where it's going to be. Everybody knows this. This is a thing that we're not supposed to talk about at all for some reason. When these reserves get this money, and I'm not going to say all of them, but many of them, the money goes into people's pockets. It doesn't go where it's supposed to be. So when this happens and there's still water boil advisories, maybe the good thing to do, maybe the smart thing to do is say, hey, this money is only allowed to go towards this or you don't get it. Or we're going to pay for companies to come in and fix it or else you don't get it. So, enough are these days where we can say, give us more money, but also we're oppressed. I don't buy it. I don't buy it for anybody else. If somebody who's a white person is on welfare and they're saying, give me more money, and then the government's saying, have you gone and looked for any jobs? And they're like, well, no. Then you're going to shame that person. You're going to say that that's not what you're supposed to be doing. So if some chiefs are out there and not putting the money towards this, hey, maybe they're not getting as much money as they need, but what's holding this back? There's no excuse for the federal government to not have clean drinking water for people who live in their own country. It's insane. It's an insane thing to think about. And half of me is just like, well, where's all this money going? And the other half is like, well, where's the federal government who claims to love Aboriginal and Native people and claims to want to get all this reconciliation done, which was never a topic before this election. It was never a thing where it's like, all of a sudden we're so divided. You got Yves Blanchet up there saying we're acting like we're in two different countries. Quebec's a different country, the native lands are a different country, and Canada's a third country. This talk was never out there like this, and we're further dividing people. And what are we dividing them over? Something as stupid as you can't provide them with clean drinking water? Like, come on. And to your point, it's all fake. Justin Trudeau, whenever he's challenged on something like this, he gets so defensive as if he's done everything he can, but he hasn't.
He yelled at her. The APTN reporter that brought up, the Indian Act and the Boyle advisory, he had the audacity to yell at her. He got mad at her, and in comparison to how he responded to the other reporters, not including the rebels, of course. But it's like, dude, you're literally gonna just yell at an Indigenous woman that's saying she's got it wrong about Indigenous issues? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, are you that arrogant? Are you that
he is
removed from reality that you think it's okay to virtue signal about reconciliation for the Indigenous Canadians? You can pander to them for their vote, all the while yelling and berating essentially on live national television a very accomplished, very successful Indigenous woman, someone who you would imagine is like a prime example of the type of person that, you would hope to produce with the policies that you're putting forth. But another thing, it's reconciliation. What does that mean? Like, what are we signing off on? What is the fine print of what reconciliation means? Because it's like, yeah, reconciliation. Yeah, I want to treat people with respect. Yeah, people deserve dignity. Yeah, I'm a good person. Yeah, I want to do the right thing. Yeah, reconciliation. Okay, that's how you hear it. That's what it means to you. But when the politicians are crafting these fancy buzzwords, to pass legislation and policy, what does that really mean to you? What is that? You need to understand these things before we just hop onto these things. And hopefully people have learned from social justice movements in the past just couple of years how anti-social justice movement these things can actually be. Like, you could have, I don't know. Sorry, it's just.
No, it's fine. It just troubles me. I'm against all these things. I'm against this wasted money. I'm against this coddling of people. But then, if I was in his shoes and I'm sitting up there and somebody's like, we don't have clean drinking water in upwards of 20 different communities, how are you going to defend that? Justin Trudeau, you got to just be like, we have failed at this. We're still working on it. Or if it's not your fault, Justin Trudeau, tell the truth. Blame the people that need to be blamed. But he can't do that. Anytime he's asked, and we've seen this over the past 2 weeks, and I don't want to say it's just him with women, but every time he's been questioned in a real conversation, he breaks down and he gets angry. We saw it at the Toronto Star. We saw it, I think, with Global News out west, and we saw it with him at the debates. He can't have a normal conversation. He can't have a regular debate. If he's not saying, for all Canadians and reconciliation and all people matter and all these little buzzwords where he talks about how much he's in love with everything, if he can't have a real conversation about real policies, he completely breaks down and he attacks the person who's interviewing him. I would never say this before the last election cycle, but he's acting more and more like a dictator. Nobody can talk to him. Nobody can ask him real questions. He can't give you real answers or else he's going to get mad at you. And he's sowing division and he doesn't even care anymore. Not even Donald Trump would say, yes, I'm dividing people and I don't care. Justin Trudeau is saying, I'm dividing people based on their medical data and I don't care. You're killing our children and none of it makes any sense. Meanwhile, he's talking at the back of his head while he's making people have non-clean drinking water. He is making them not be able to have clean water because as the federal government, when you've got a blank check to do whatever you want, which is what he has right now, he can't just say, let's pump tons of money into it, go get it done in the next, 2 months or however long it takes. He can do it, he just doesn't want to. He's not that smart of a guy. And I think that's all the time we have.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's a great place to end it. It's gross. He just resorts to ad hominem and attacks, and he's definitely the most divisive and polarizing figure in politics on the world stage today. And not just the West. He's the most divisive leader in the world.
It's
right
true.
now.
So just really quickly, that polling, you don't have to bring it up, Efron. Whoever what that mainstream media source was it CTV you said? They had PPC at 6.1% as your preferred leader. Everybody else was basically tied at 30. And then in this poll, they're at 5%, which is kind of low for what they've been. They've been as high as 11. And CPC and Liberals are pretty much tied from what I can guess. People are siphoning off Liberal to NDP. People are siphoning off Conservative to PPC. Bloc and Green are failing miserably. Final chat from Flame2323. Watch Jordan Peterson's interview with Rex Murphy, best political commentary I've seen so far. You're wrong, Flame. The best political commentary is on rebelnews.com. And we have events to throw to. Is that Producer Efron what I'm... Okay. Our guest is coming up on September 21st. We can't tell you who it is. We will announce it soon. Tickets will be non-expensive. There will not be asks of vaccine passports. The guest will be sweet. He will be epic. She will be epic. He or she, whomever it is, I can't tell you. September 21st in the Toronto area. Thanks for watching. Matt Brevner, final words. I'm pumped.
Well, I need to say, I commend Rebel for throwing events that are accessible to everybody. Especially with low ticket prices, because politics should be something that's accessible for everybody. It should be something that's easy for everybody to get involved in. And we live in a culture now with the liberal bourgeoisie, Laurentian types, where politics is not for the people, it's for the elites, and that's it. And the media is for the elites, and that's it. So, a $10 ticket, I think, is such an amazing thing, and I encourage you to get engaged and get involved.
Or we can listen to AOC and wear a tax the rich dress at a $30,000 ticket. It's only 200 G's per table, Matt Brevner. Come on, everybody can afford that. Thanks everybody for watching on Odyssey, on Super U, on Rumble, YouTube, I guess. We love you there anyways, but not YouTube. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll be there next week. Suit up, maybe, I guess, Producer Efron. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
David Menzies laughing.
Warning. Censorship.
Great segue out of it.